How's it going, folks? This is a brand new series I'm starting, which is Mythbuster Mondays. Every Monday for the foreseeable future, I'm going to bust some myths for you and show you why that thing that you hear spoken about so much may not be true or may not be as important as we're told it is. Firstly, we're talking about leaving headroom for mastering. What is it all about? Should you actually always leave 6 dB like a million bedroom producers on forums will tell you, or is it a myth? Well, this is my take on it and I want to hear yours. So before you watch this, leave me a comment letting me know how you feel about it. Then when you're done watching the video, maybe comment on that comment and see if what I've said makes sense and if my reasoning is sound. Whatever. Let's go. I often read that you should leave 6 dB of headroom for your mastering engineer to work in, and I've received tracks for mastering where the client has been quite certain about saying to me, don't worry, I've left you 6 dB of headroom. In fact, if a mastering engineer says that to me, it instantly sets off alarm bells because it means that he or she is listening to a myth as opposed to spending a very small amount of time realizing that this is nonsense, and experienced mastering engineers will see straight through it. A couple of dB should be more than enough. Really, just not clipping should be enough 90% of the time, because all the mastering engineer has to do in order to get it quieter, if they want it, is turn the thing down. WAV audio peaking at -6 dBFS is exactly the same as something peaking at -1 dBFS, just 5 dB quieter. It's completely linear. I know mastering is seen as a dark art sometimes, but their volume faders in their fancy mastering DAWs are exactly the same as yours. Check this out. Gain is just gain. If I have two identical channels with the same thing on, we see signal on the meters. If I turn one down by 3 dB on the fader and do the same thing to the other with a gain plugin, when I invert the polarity, I get nothing. The volume fader is the same as a gain pot on this utility plugin. The same is true for most, if not all, fancy pants analog modeling plugins. The output gain at the end of the plugin is just a simple turn up or turn down. If I do the same 3 dB trick with an analog style plugin, then I get the same result. Nothing. Try it with another. Nothing. And another. Nothing. But I do get something, however, when I clip the output. If I turn the fader up to the point of clipping and turn the analog modeling plugin's gain up by the same amount with the polarity inverted, I don't get nothing. This is because that analog modeling stuff that's happening is making it non-linear. The clipping is now not identical to the clipping within the DAW because it's not meant to be. It's meant to replicate analog clipping. Technically speaking, even though we're clipping the channel, we're not actually creating any lasting damage, and just by turning down the master output, we can get all that information back. Check this video out at the top for more info on that. So clipping can be unreliable at best. Depending on where it's being clipped, it may sound different than clipping somewhere else in the chain. It seems to me like this 6 dB of headroom myth is kind of a historical tag-along that came from the days of gear that not only sounded bad when it clipped, but also sounded bad when it almost clipped. As long as the mix isn't clipping, the mastering engineer should not care. The only times it may be true. So if they're saying it as a safety precaution so that you actually think about your output. Think about it. If they're telling you to output a certain level on your main output, the first thing you're going to do is actually look at your main output and check the level. Had they not said it, you may not have even looked at your main output since you started the mix. They don't know whether you have or not, so it's kind of like a safety net. If the mastering engineer has a preset chain that is set to receive a level of -6 dB, side note, if the mastering engineer is using presets, I'm not using that mastering engineer, but if their gear is set up to receive around -6 dB, then I kind of get it, but still, it's a bit silly. If you have something in the chain that is accentuating intersample peaks or that is causing intersample peaks, for example, if you have a non-true peak limiter set up and absolutely slamming your mix bus and chopping off 8 dB from the transients, don't do that, then it's conceivable that a limiter that isn't true peak could allow some intersample peaks that could approach 6 dB louder than the display peak. It's pretty unlikely though. The main reason that this myth has stuck around is, in my mind, because people still think of mastering as this untouchable thing full of secrets and special handshakes. It's not, it's just audio. The difference really being that the folks doing the mastering have very good ears and have listened to a lot of music for a very long time, so they know what to expect and how to get stuff sounding great. There's also a danger of going too low, with analog modeling plugins being a mainstay in an awful lot of mixing sessions, and people forgetting to turn off that amazingly useful noise button on the Waves plugins. If you're exporting your mix too low, say -10 dB at the loudest peaks, you might get a bit of noise on the tails of tracks or in quiet sections, which then have to be removed with noise reduction. Again, maybe not an issue, but there's definitely a balance here between being too loud and being too quiet. Do yourself a favour, don't assume -6 dB. Don't assume anything in life. If you're sending something to be mastered, then ask the engineer what they want. And if they say -6, be suspicious. They'll probably just say, don't clip. And in most cases, that's the right answer. If in doubt, just don't clip. Maybe leave 1 dB of headroom just for safety in the sample peaks, and you're good to go. What do you think? Is there a reason for this weird 6 dB stuff when sending off a track for mastering? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.